Hey guys! So we've had a little bit of a break recently because if you do follow us here at Fresh on any of the well-known social media platforms, you'll know that on Friday, the 20th of June, we hosted our incredible not-for-profit awards evening, the Freshies. This year was bigger and better than ever. We raised £28,632, which meant we did have to sacrifice a week of recording, sad times, so that we could make sure everything was ready to go for the big night. But we're back today with another incredible episode lined up, and I'm really excited to be joined by a fabulous lady, Paula Cohen, as we dive into leadership challenges that we can come across within a growing business like us here at Fresh and what you can actually do to deal with them. So hi Paula.
Hello.
Would you like to introduce yourself? I'll do my Cilla Black moment, like who are you and where'd you come from?
What's your name and where'd you come from?
Yeah, what's your name and where'd you come from?
Fabulous, thank you, Laura. Well, I am Paula Cohen. My business is Taylory, and I run my own company as a business coach. So I work with people just like you who are growing a business, and generally they're people who are amazing at what they do, but they just find themselves overwhelmed or bamboozled by the millions of things that actually grow that go into growing a business. So they need a little bit of outside advice, sometimes a bit of encouragement, sometimes a bit of arse kicking, and generally everywhere in between.
All of the above.
All of the above.
Yeah. Speaking from experience, it's you start a business and you're like, because you're good at something.
Absolutely.
Or you love something, or both of those things, hopefully.
Yes, ideally both.
Hopefully the thing that you're good at is the thing that you love. And then you get going with that. If you're lucky, you've clients straight away. But then everything that comes with it is an absolute minefield.
Yes, totally is. Totally. And, so often you've gone into business because you've been employed somewhere else. So you've had a team of people that can help you with different things, or you've only had to focus on that one thing that you're really good at, and you don't have to do accounting and marketing and the admin and everything else. And suddenly it's your business, and now everything is your responsibility. And it's your responsibility 24/7 as well.
Yeah, that's the thing. Yeah, 24/7. It's definitely the thing that I think about. The last thing I think about before I go to bed, before I go to sleep, and it's probably the first thing. It's probably my first thought when I open my eyes in the morning.
And I often talk to people that if you've got people in your family or your friendship circle who run a business or have run a business, then they will get that. But if all of your friends and family are in a traditional employed role, they tend to not understand the relentlessness of that. And it's not even that it's pressure, it's just that it's always there. And you never get that opportunity to leave work at 5 o'clock and just trust that everybody else will sort it. You don't get to go on holiday and just leave everything to everybody else and just close the laptop and that's fine, it's not my problem anymore. So it is very much a 24/7 presence.
Yeah.
Obviously there are lots of things you can do to make that manageable, but that's quite a journey.
Yeah, and yeah, it is a journey, and it is that all-consuming element, and like, it's really, I think, really good point to make what you said about your friends and family. If they have their own businesses, they get it.
Yeah.
But what has been challenging, I mean, I'm luckily, my fiance Peter is amazing and very understanding, but it was tricky to navigate at first because you're working all the time. My laptop has literally travelled the globe with me, and the only time I've not taken it is when I went on my Ibiza hen do the other week.
Yep.
And that was only 2 working days. But it is all consuming, and it can be really lonely.
Really can. Yeah.
And we started, we'll get onto it in a sec, but we started, me and Emily, my sister, who's my business partner at Fresh, who are a recruitment business with a twist, if anyone wants to know. We had each other, but at the beginning it was just me, and I felt lonely and actually felt a bit depressed and stressed that I was by myself. And it was me and Emily, and we didn't know what we were doing. And we went networking. That's where we met you. Yes. And it was just like we got another business partner overnight, which was amazing. So we'll talk more on that soon. But I suppose what I wanted to start with was you're approaching an incredible milestone in your business, which is really exciting. 10 years of running Taylory with your business coaching service to people like me that just need help, support and guidance and some company during their business journey. But I'm really curious, from all the amazingly individual and interesting challenges you've probably come across working with the different businesses that you do, where does leadership rank in terms of difficulty? And is it one of the biggest hurdles that you see people facing as they start to own and run a business?
I think undoubtedly leadership, managing people, building your team, that side of the business is without a question one of the toughest parts of growing a business. There are things like pricing is constantly one of the things I see as one of the toughest areas of business, but you can start to work through that. And there are, strategies that you can follow and advice that you can take. And it's a kind of short problem that you can approach quickly. Whereas leadership and management is just something that will probably be a challenge through the entire life of a business.
It was constant, isn't it? You don't, like you say, you don't overcome that and then stop leading.
No, that's managing. The thing. You can work on your pricing, you can have a massive challenge with it, but you can overcome that, and then it's done and dusted, and you move forward.
Yeah.
Whereas leadership and management is absolutely constant. It's never finished. You've never at any point kind of nailed it, put that tick in the box, close the lid, and off we go. It's always there, and it's emotional. And it's hugely people-based, and people are not a system, they're not a strategy, and everybody's different. So leading a team of one type of people will be a completely different challenge and need a totally different skill set to lead in a different kind of team. And it's that ability to be able to constantly up-level your skills, to understand the individual wants, needs, nature of every person in your business. And it's the joys of things like hiring somebody when it doesn't work out, and not feeling completely defeated when somebody turns out to be a terrible, toxic employee or that kind of thing. When you hire somebody who, often when you take on your first employee, and quite often that will be somebody quite young, and it can feel like they've just become your absolute best buddy. Now there's two of you in it together, and it's a really, really tight-knit thing. But frequently that person then will want to go on and do something different, and it's often hard for a business owner not to take that personally, because you've invested so much time and so much emotion, and you can't come to terms with the fact that they don't absolutely love this business to the same extent that you do, and they're no longer completely satisfied and totally lit up by it. So there's just so many different challenges around leadership, and I think it's a constant need of energy for when you're running a business as well.
Yeah, it absolutely is, because it's a constant thing, and there's two. Leading and managing a different thing, but for a long time you have to do both.
Very much.
I probably still manage to a degree some of the team, but obviously we now have Vicky, who is the ops manager, and she is the manager and manages everybody, and me and Emily very much leaders.
Yes.
But at the beginning we had to do both, and we found them both really hard.
Yeah.
And I think what's difficult about leadership and management is that, because like you said, you're dealing with people.
Yeah.
They're not a product or a service. They have
predictable.
thoughts. They have lives. They're very unpredictable.
Yes. Well, that's it. They have things going on outside of the business which will impact the business, or it'll impact their performance, and
that they're not in control of.
No. And that's so tough, isn't it? You know, how much leeway do you give people when they're having a tough time? How much support do you give them? But at what point do you need to crack the whip? That's a really tough challenge.
And how to crack the whip is really tough when you've never done it before.
Yes.
And I think that's, for me, I'm probably a bit of a control freak, as you well know. Delegating is not the easiest thing that comes to me. But you're not in control as a leader.
Yeah.
You are in control of your business to a degree, because you know what you can do, but there's economical, environmental changes that will happen that you aren't in control of, and you still need to lead your business through them. Your team are people, and you have no idea what's coming around the corner with them. You can do everything you can do, but then still things will happen. So you're not in control. And I think that's why it feels like such an uncomfortable place to be sometimes. And that's possibly why I think a lot of people try to avoid it.
Without a doubt. I speak to so many people that say, I've managed people in the past, I don't want to hire anybody. I don't want to grow a team. It's a pain in the arse. I'm just not doing it. And then what they get to is a point where their business has plateaued, or they're stuck. And, on the surface, well, that's definitely an option. But they're pushed to capacity, but they've got loads more potential. They've actually got clients waiting, and they can't grow the business because they're so adamant that they're not going to hire. And usually it might take me a little while, but generally I wear them down and persuade them into it. And eventually they realise that it's absolutely the right way to go. But I totally understand that whole hesitance about not wanting to manage people and not wanting to step into that leadership role. I mean, you talked there about things that come round the corner. And obviously we've seen things like COVID, which there's no way any of us could have predicted that. And I think even when it kicked off, we still didn't expect it to be quite what it was. And then I think that's a really good example of that difference between management and leadership, because at that point in time, in the management role, you are working with people on the day-to-day stuff, you're just managing the work on their desk, and you're just sticking to the targets and staying focused on the job at hand and just trying to not let all of that emotion and uncertainty come in, but you're kind of just sticking to the job. Whereas your role as a leader at that point is to be inspiring and motivating and talking to people about the future when you might be absolutely terrified yourself.
1 minute you're crying on the couch,
Yeah.
looking at your cash flow.
Yep. But you can't share that with the team, you know, because you've got to have people that still feel positive and motivated. And that's where a lot of the leadership pressure comes from, is that fine line between wanting to really inspire your people and build a culture of trust and honesty, but understanding where that line is and at what point is sharing oversharing. You know, if you're having cash flow challenges, where's the gap between cracking the whip and pushing people towards targets, and where's the gap between sort of oversharing and making people feel scared about their future, so that actually they might then go and start looking for other jobs, and the whole thing turns into a vicious cycle.
Like a tightrope.
Yeah.
At all times you could fall to your death.
Hopefully not quite to your death. Just a small bruise on the office carpet. And off we go again.
Yeah, just a small bruise or a small scratch. But COVID for us was really tough, and I suppose that's where our natural strengths as leaders took place. But having someone like yourself to rely on through the tough times, not just COVID, but so that we can have those frank conversations and talk about what, you know, when the proverbial is hitting the fan, you're like, we can't share this with the team. Yeah. But we need to talk about it, because we need to let it out. You have to get it out. We need to overcome it. And then I can show a united and positive front to the team. Yeah. But it's showing vulnerability at the same time. It's really important.
Yeah, it is. And that's a huge part of culture, isn't it? Is the team, allowing the team to see that you're human, and that you really care. But you talked as well about business being quite a lonely place. And as a leader, it really can be quite isolated, because all of that weight sits with you. And I think that's where it is super important to have people that you can talk to, even down to things like going out networking. I always think networking is an absolutely brilliant tool for just building your kind of group of business buddies and some natural support. Yeah. But I think when things are tough, working with somebody like me, or, you know, making sure that you've got some people there that you can talk to, because otherwise the whole thing can really get bottled up and become very emotional and very overwhelming.
Yeah, absolutely. And we started networking not immediately. So 2016 set up, I think probably was the following year we got networking, because we tried to do what we normally did from a sales perspective when we used to work for recruitment agencies, and that didn't work. And we were like, oh my goodness, how are we going to get clients? So we went networking. Oh my God, absolutely terrified going into for my first networking. But what was really good was we met you really early on. So you've been part of Fresh for almost 9 years. Oh. Its whole age, and other business owners.
Yes.
And building that network up of other leaders.
Yes, absolutely.
To share with each other, be vulnerable with each other. Yeah. And you end up being customers of each other and helping each other in other ways. But for me, it was that camaraderie and that support. It wasn't as isolating, because you've got, you're a business owner.
Absolutely.
As well, as well as being a business coach and helping and guiding us and helping us. It's definitely alleviates that loneliness and helps overcome challenges, because you're not just talking about them in your head.
Yeah, totally.
You're right, or to yourself, to your dogs, which does happen a lot. But to you,
they're good listeners, the dogs, but maybe not so great with advice
or solutions. No, but just as quickly before we move on, I think, which would be dovetails quite nicely to my next question. But post COVID, like you talked before about when people leave your business, taking it personally. And I think that to not take it personally as a business creator and owner and employer of people, I do think is impossible. I think
it's definitely tough.
It's like asking water to not be wet, but it has eased for me over the years. And when during COVID, we had to really step up and lead the team, and we really we were always a close-knit team, but really had to be even closer to get through what we were going through.
Yeah.
And we did, and it was only after COVID that I would say we had our first significant leaver. And that was really tough to deal with because, like you said, I felt like we had an extra bond because we'd been through this terrible trauma together.
It really was.
And come out of it the other side and achieve success. And then we lost our first few people. And after that year of COVID, you think it really hit us hard because we thought we'd had that bond and that emotional response was really real. And I think people don't necessarily realise when you're talking to your boss, they are people, they are humans, and they are vulnerable, and they have emotions and feelings. But you working with you through that, and what you really helped us to do was recognise where our strengths lay as leaders and managers, definitely more in the leader camp than manager, where our shortfalls were. So if we were responsible for these people leaving because of our shortfalls, we looked inwards, which was really painful. And we realised that we weren't amazing at everything through your guidance. And obviously we hired a manager. Now that's Vicky. We lead effectively, we manage effectively, and our team retention has increased over the last years, 4 or 5 years. But also my response to people moving on is much better. It's still emotional, and it still smarts, but it's not as bad as it was.
I think there's definitely you are different to a lot of businesses here in the fact that all of you are just incredibly passionate about the business, and you are naturally, I would say, emotional people. And there are perhaps some people who are a little less emotional than you, who wouldn't find it quite so tough. But I still think most people do, because you put your heart and soul into the business, and you do put your heart and soul into those people. And coming to terms with the fact that at the end of the day, to them, this is a job.
Just a job.
It is just a job.
It's heartbreaking sometimes.
And that, like you say, that really can feel incredibly emotional.
Yeah.
But it's also then, it's kind of stepping back a little bit and recognising that at that moment in time, you see what you've given them and how much development and how much you've invested in them and how much they're better placed now to move on with their lives. So it wasn't a waste of time. They've helped the business, you've helped them. It's just everybody then moving on to the next phase.
Yeah, and it's that switch of mindset that you've given, I've given them all of this, and now they're moving on and leaving me, and what a waste of time. We've developed that person, invested in that person, we've helped support, they've grown in confidence and skills, we've been part of their journey.
Yes.
Makes it much easier to deal with.
There's a great quote actually from...
I feel like I've grown up.
You have, definitely. There's a great quote from Brad Sugars, who is the man behind Action Coaches, the global business coaching franchise where I started off.
I have his book.
Oh, yes. But he often talks about a conversation that he had with one of his customers early on, and this guy was very frustrated that he would keep training people up and then they would leave, and he was really getting annoyed by it and couldn't decide what to do. And he just sort of said, I'm so frustrated that I'm spending all this time and money training these people up and then they just go and leave. What could possibly be worse? And Brad says to him, well, what would be even worse is if you didn't bother training these people and then they stayed. Because then you just end up with people who are rubbish and they don't care about the company.
Oh my God, I love that.
So you've got to look at that as you've invested in them. You've reaped the rewards of that in terms of a great employee. But then it's just naturally run its course. Yeah. They're off to do the next thing for them. And actually, they're clearing the space then for you to hire the person who is probably the step above them.
Yeah, and what people I don't think about in that moment is what you've learned from that relationship and that experience, and how you're better, more developed.
Yeah, and one of the things you mentioned there, which I think is really powerful, is looking inwards. Because it's really easy, whether it's a situation like that or anything to do with leading the business where it doesn't quite go to plan, it's really easy to just blame or lash out or be annoyed or be frustrated and just kind of be a little bit defeated by it. And actually the hardest thing to do at that point is look inwards and say, how have we influenced this situation? Is there anything we could have done differently? Do I need to improve my skills in a certain area so I am better at leadership? And taking those looks inwards is really tough, but it's absolutely the thing that then moves you forwards, because then you're in a better position to do everything better the next time round and really help you grow and help the business grow as a result.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, you only learn. Failure is okay and mistakes are okay, but it's a learning piece off the back of it.
Without
and
doubt.
sometimes that takes some courage to look at
It does.
where have we messed up.
Yeah.
And how can we be better?
And really, that's one of the distinctive signs of leadership. If you're somebody who's willing to ask those questions of yourself and learn those lessons, that's a sign of great leadership. If you're not quite brave enough to ask those questions, then you're probably stuck more in the management area.
Okay, that's a really good point to make. So if you are in this situation where I've been and other people have been, where you hire people or they're leaving or you've had your first person resign recently, like, you can get through it. You might need Paula or someone, maybe not quite as good as Paula, to help you through it, but you can get through it. I listened to Stephen Bartlett's Diary of a CEO for the first time around that time, and one of his very first episodes talks about exactly this.
Wow.
And look at him now.
Yes,
So,
absolutely.
there's hope for us all.
Yeah.
So talking about employees, I know we probably touched on this, but in terms of like hiring your first employee. So in 2017, feels like many moons ago, I remember where I was sat. So we didn't have an office at the time.
Yeah.
And I was sat in my back bedroom with my IKEA desk on the phone to you and Emily, talking about making that first step to hire our very first employee, which was a massive step for us. And we made the right decision, I think, off the back of your advice.
You did.
But in your experience, how can a business owner like me and Emily, how do we tell when it's the right time to make that first hire?
But just before I answer that, I remember that conversation as well, because I remember exactly where I was, because we'd gone away for the weekend. I think we'd gone for a long weekend at our caravan in Anglesey, and I remember I was in the bedroom with my phone, and you'd just done your interviews, and you were stuck between two people, and one was slightly older and more experienced, but only wanted part-time.
Self-employed.
Oh,
yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
I'd forgotten that bit.
Part-time and self-employed she was, yeah.
And then you had somebody who was younger, much less experienced, but she was very positive and very excited by the opportunity, but she wanted full-time. And you were in that space of, do we take the safe option with the part-time and the experience, or do we go for it with the full-time? And we just talked through how busy you were, how many leads you had coming in, how much capacity you had, how confident you were about ramping things up so that you would be able to fill a full-time person's time. And that's the way you went. So we went a bit gung-ho, but it was absolutely the right thing to do. And I think in terms of when do you know it's the time to hire, I would probably typically say it's usually well before you make the decision to hire. Because it is, it's a terrifying moment for most people, taking on that first person, knowing that you've got the responsibility for somebody else's salary and their ability to pay their bills and pay their rent or their mortgage. Yeah. That's a really serious weight.
I felt like I'd become a parent overnight.
But then it's also really empowering afterwards, because then afterwards you kind of think, I am helping somebody to pay their bills. I'm giving this person the power to, update their home or whatever it is. And actually it's a really lovely thing to do. But in terms of knowing when, the obvious question is around capacity. And it's typically that point where you're feeling bordering on run ragged. When you're starting to drop a few balls. Now, ideally, I would say don't wait until you get to that point. And what most people do...
Just the juggling stage.
Yes. When you're at moderate juggling stage, then it's already probably a little bit too late. Your ideal is that you're at something like 80% capacity. Because when you bring somebody in, they're going to need time from you. They need that training, that development, and just that development of the relationship and the understanding of the business. So if you're already maxed out at 110, 120%, then actually bringing somebody in at that point is really stressful. And there's a risk that you both end up winging it a little bit. So if you can pull that back a little bit, go slightly earlier, then you've got a bit of capacity to really support and develop them. But what I'd say is, make sure that you've got a really good marketing plan in place first. Know that you feel confident that you will acquire more customers so you can give that person enough work to do. And you don't have to be able to see where every single client's going to come from. You don't have to be specifically able to say, this is all the work we've got booked in. We absolutely know this money's coming in this month. You just need to have enough confidence that there is a flow of leads and enough confidence that you can convert the right sort of number of leads, and that you might have to go a bit hell for leather for 3 to 6 months to really make it work. But again, there's a cheesy phrase where people say, hire somebody when you can cover 50% of their salary, because essentially they'll free you up to just bring in the extra 50%, because it actually frees you up then to do more networking, more marketing, more following up with prospects.
That's so true. And that's a really good tip to hire before you absolutely have gone past that point where you need them. But making the plan and looking forwards, because we speak to a lot of businesses, obviously doing what we do in the world of hiring and recruitment, and we help businesses scale, but we also help businesses hire that first person. And I'm really passionate about that, because I really remember what it was like, and they listening to them get in their heads, and I get it, because that's where we were. Like, they have to have 6 months worth of salary in the bank to pay them, and they've got to have 6 months worth of work to hire this person, and I'm like, you don't. But I get why you think that. And I think, like you say, just having enough of a plan to feel confident that you can support yourself over the next few months with what's coming in should then give you the confidence that you will be able to feed somebody else.
Yes.
Because that's the risk. Like, the part-time self-employed was low risk, because if we didn't have the work, we wouldn't give her the hours. And she was self-employed, so we didn't have to dismiss her if it wasn't working out. We didn't have the money.
An idiot. That would be the only real risk, wouldn't it? Financially, the risk was really minimal.
And having to fill somebody up who was full-time employed, permanent, was like, oh my goodness. But you're absolutely right, of course, as you always are, that they will free up your time to do more. So you will bring what you've got in the plan will be increased by bringing on that person.
Yeah, and I think what a lot of people also don't realise at that moment in time is how much extra they're doing. So when you bring in that first employee, yes, okay, like in your case, they're going to start working on filling jobs, but there were probably 75 million other things that they were just able to help you with.
Actually,
could you just do this? Would you be able to handle that? And all those little could you just things very often is about 20% of your time. So the power that gives you back, and giving you more time then to really focus on growth, that's where it all comes together.
Oh, and one thing as well, another thing on top of all of that for me that I really remember is having someone to man the phone in the inbox so you could just take some time off.
Absolutely.
And then I was like, I remember talking to you again, I can't take time off because this and this and this and blah, 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 blah. And then I went on holiday for a week, which was terrifying, but nothing major happened. Things, I was notified of things that I needed to deal with, but I had ideas because I switched my brain off a little bit. So my subconscious was driving, and I'm on the beach having creative ideas about how to make the business better. And that would not have happened if I hadn't made the step and had someone that I could rely on back at base to just keep things ticking over, so that I could do that.
Well, you know very well, Laura, that I'm constantly ranting at all my clients to actually take more time off, because not only do you need time off just to purely recharge the batteries, and let's face it, none of us went into business because we wanted to work 24/7.
No, we were, have a business. You'll have freedom and flexibility and all this time. I'm like, liars.
What is all this? What is this all-consuming beast time?
Like I was
now running?
misled.
So it's not just about the fact that you definitely need that time to recharge, but you've hit the nail on the head, is that when you actually step away, what it does to allow your brain to just have that downtime, the thoughts come through, and it's amazing. The thing I love about my clients going on holiday is they will always come back and they either say, I've had this brilliant idea, I'm really excited about it. More often than not, what they come back with, which is probably even better, is, I've realised I'm so sick of tolerating this thing in my business and I'm not putting up with it anymore.
Oh, wow.
And that's massive, because it's one of those things where people just keep doing, because you're on that treadmill. And you can't see that. When you're on that treadmill all day, every day, you can't see it. And then suddenly you step away and you go, hang on a minute, why do we waste so much time doing this? Or why am I stuck with that shit client that just doesn't appreciate us? I am not putting it up with anymore. And it's often a massive turning point for people. Quite often they'll come back and say, I do realise I need to put up my prices. You've been telling me it for 6 months and now I'm ready. So that's a very proud moment.
So it should be.
But actually the other thing to add there is taking a break and not being in the business 24/7 is a great sign of leadership. Because when you say to your team, I trust you to run this place, then that in itself is really powerful. The message that you give is that I'm not a control freak. I know you people are good at what you do, and I really trust you, and I know that you can represent this company, that you can do the job, that you are part of the brand. And in terms of actually motivating and inspiring the team, that's a really inspiring thing to do. So take more holidays, everybody.
Take more holidays. Basically,
Yes.
those are the main things I have in my head from Paula. Like, never discount. She's always in my ear about that. So when everyone's asking for a discount, all I can hear is Paula saying, don't discount unless you're going to get something in return.
Something big in return.
And take more holidays. And generally, me going on holiday is for the best of the business.
Absolutely
because that's
is.
when I have my ideas.
Yep.
And the team flourish, like you say. So talking about that and trusting your team and
Yes.
delegating, that's been a journey for me as a control freak. But Richard Branson, he's known for well known for saying that you need to hire people better than you,
Yes.
which is not as easy as that sounds.
It's really not.
So how do you go about doing that and building with the right people, but building trust so that you can
and
delegate?
I think all of that's actually a massive question in itself, and there's a few different sort of sub questions to that. And I think perhaps if we talk a little bit about your journey, because you've said a few times I'm a control freak, and you're somebody who's very driven, and you're a huge action taker, and you're also somebody that works really hard. And that's great from a position of leadership, but actually that's quite a challenging skill set from a management point of view, because as a manager, I think what you recognised is that can make you quite demanding, quite impatient.
Yeah, okay.
I
agree with both of those.
Sometimes a little sort of bold, maybe a bit too direct.
Yeah.
But these are things that are brilliant assets to growing a business, and that's where these dilemmas come in. And what you've really learned over the time is how do you harness your skills in the best possible way? And the leadership role for you is absolutely perfect. It totally fits your skill set, whereas management doesn't.
No, definitely
but
not. I have to really
equally-
try hard to be a manager.
Yeah.
Takes
But
a lot of
equally
effort.
then trusting somebody else to take on that management role is huge. So I think if we almost then step that right back to the beginning of just starting to trust other people and starting to delegate, one of the most important things to do is to get clear processes in place. And again, when it's your own business and you start it from scratch, there's no processes. You're winging it on a daily basis. There's plenty of people 10 years in there still winging it on a daily basis. But if you don't have clear processes, then you can't leave somebody else to just do it and trust that they know exactly how to do it and when to do it and why to do it. And by starting to create processes and things like workflows and clear deadlines and turnaround times, that gives you the ability to take that step back and allow somebody else to do that work, and they can see what their boundaries are. They understand what the standards are they need to hit, and they kind of know what the limitations are, but they know what level of trust they've got within that. So you can kind of both crack on that way. So that's almost the first step. It's recognising as well the difference between delegating and just sort of offloading on somebody and just abdicating, where you kind of ditch everything on them and don't give them enough support and guidance. But it then becomes, once you've developed those processes and you can then see that work can get done and there is clarity about how that happens and that there is consistency, then you can start to take that next step of thinking, okay, how do I give somebody else more senior responsibility here? Because they can manage the processes. And you've got that clarity in place. And I think that's exactly what you've done here. And actually, Emily in particular turned into the process guru, didn't she?
Very unexpectedly.
Which is, as somebody who's she's not a process person naturally, but she completely took on board building all the processes for your delivery team here and absolutely nailed it. And it's those processes then that have given you that ability to bring in a manager. And I would say I think you're quite open about it, that as a people manager, Vicky's better at that than you.
100%.
And that's where we need to move to that sort of Richard Branson phase of saying it does not have to be me that knows everything, that does everything, that controls everything. And it's a hard step, that, because from the outset, it's all down to you. And that comes as a real shock to begin with. And then it's almost like, right, okay, I've got a grip on all of this stuff. I've taken control of everything. And now you're telling me I've got to actually let go of all this control. So you're having to almost regress and start giving back some of that control. But this again is a real sign of leadership, that when you are willing to hire people that can do things in the business who are better than you, then what you're doing is you're hiring the best possible team, you are supporting everybody else in the team in the best possible way, and you're giving the business the best opportunity to grow. And that, again, it's a sign of vulnerability as a leader, that you say, I don't know everything. I'm not the best person at everything here, but I'm the best person at spotting who's best for that.
Yeah, that's amazing. What a great answer. And when we talk about processes and systems a lot, like we get asked about it when we apply for awards, and I think at the beginning, so 2018, we entered our first awards, and we were asked about processes and systems, and we hadn't got a clue what that even meant. Like what? And we didn't have any, obviously.
Yeah.
We do now.
And that is normal in the early start of a business. Usually you only bring in processes when shit starts hitting fan and you think, oh my God, we better do something here.
We need a plan. Yeah, and that's a process or a system. Like, I think sometimes people think systems are like, are your tech systems, your CRMs, obviously they are systems.
Yes.
Sometimes a system is just a way of doing it. It could just be an
100%.
Excel spreadsheet.
It might be a checklist, a spreadsheet. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think I wanted to make that point because we've recently been interviewed again, and I think they came in, the judges, to the office, and they're like, who do we talk to about processes and systems? And I directed them to Andrew and Vicky, who manage them.
Absolutely.
And have developed them from Emily creating them. But I had to just let them know beforehand, when they talk about processes and systems, obviously you know what a process is because we use that word, but really a process is a manual, a set of instructions, guidelines to follow, and a step-by-step way, like a recipe.
Yes.
Is a process.
Yeah, absolutely.
But I think because it's just a word, it's a phrase that's used, people don't always know what it is.
No, it's very true, and I think sometimes it can feel intimidating.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, I need
very
some
corporate.
fancy tech.
Yeah, very
I need
formal.
some massive, complex, expensive, incredible, integrated system.
Yeah.
And you just kind of go, I don't know what that is, so I'll not bother at all.
Yeah. And now you don't know how to talk about it.
Yes.
When if someone asked you in a different way, like, oh, absolutely, we've got a manual or a company guidebook or whatever, however you talk. No, that's all outdated terminology, but some people use that terminology.
It can be any, I talk about this a lot because I think people do feel intimidated by processes, but I always talk about processes actually are there to set you free.
Yeah.
And people think that a process is boxing you in, whereas actually a process is just there to make sure that you cover the basics relentlessly and consistently. And you don't have to think about it. So it just gets done, and then you've got much more time for creativity or client relationships or marketing or whatever else you actually want to do that's more exciting and interesting.
So would you say that that's the first step to delegation, the processes? Or would you say there's another way of like, how do you start that delegation process?
I think in my head, I'm sitting here now thinking, I feel like there might be another answer to that question and like I'm forgetting something. But no, I think processes is the first step. I think there's probably sort of two halves to it in terms of understanding the roles and responsibilities element and exactly what you need of a person to carry out that role. But in terms of delegating tasks, it's processes, and with those processes you might need things in there that talk about things like standards, timings, deadlines, anything like that. But all of that can be put into a process, and then that gives somebody else the clarity on what to do, and it gives you the confidence to know that it will be done the way you want it done without you having to double check on that all the time. That's how
that's where the trust comes from, isn't it? So that
you
can then, you do a little bit, it feels safe because you've got a process, and then it's followed, and then trust is built, and then it's followed again and by other people, and trust increases, and then you get to this point, you're like, actually, do you know what, this is working really well, how else can we do it? What more can we do?
What's the next process? And it gives you that confidence, so you don't feel out of control. You are giving away control, but it hasn't vanished. It's just not that it's not you that's having to constantly monitor.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and speaking from experience, like that is just been so freeing, like you say, and it's been what's been a joy is watching the team flourish, because I've allowed myself to delegate through the creation of processes and systems, and building trust and relationships. Not just has it been good for me, but when you watch their journey and their progress and how they flourish, that is one of my most favourite things.
And that's amazing, isn't it?
Gives me joy.
Perfect.
And I suppose talking about that, so I have friendships. I would say that they are friendships, but they are very positive and close relationships that Emily and I have with the team. We do Vicky is the buffer. We never had a buffer before, so
Yeah.
but that's what we need. But how would you? So I think that's a misstep that we made at the beginning, that we didn't have the buffer, and it was all so new, and we've got these people that wanted to come in our business, and we probably developed friendships and the culture off the back of that. But how do you stop yourself from? So I learned a lot from that. But
Yeah.
how would you say that to people listening, you would stop yourself from falling into that friendship trap with your first employees?
Yeah, and
but
I
still
think
build that culture.
that's incredibly hard, because this person comes in and all of a sudden they're like
a family member.
Yeah, they are. They are your business family all of a sudden, and you really want to nurture them, and you love the value that they're bringing to the business, and it really can become a very, very close relationship, particularly if there's just 2 of you or just 3 of you. It's kind of natural that will become close. The key thing I would say, where that becomes a bit of a challenge, is when you at some point then need to actually challenge or give some constructive feedback, let's just say. If it's gone too far down that friendship route, then that's really difficult. You're having to suddenly change that relationship dynamic to actually say, do you know what, it's not okay that you keep coming in 5 minutes late every day, because I know we're mates, but actually this is a job. That's what becomes really difficult about it, is if you go down too far down that friendship route, it's almost inevitable that that person will start taking some liberties. There might be little ones, but they'll start to grate and they'll start to frustrate you.
And grow.
Yes, very likely. And that's the thing, if you don't nip them in the bud, then they will absolutely grow, because if you don't nip them in the bud, you're giving them permission. You're saying it's okay. So I think the key thing I would say is start out with the right intention, that you recognise that this is a business relationship, but recognise that this person is an employee. They're not your bestie. They may well be lovely, and there's nothing wrong. You shouldn't avoid a friendship. I'm not saying never go out to lunch together and never go to the pub together, but one way I think you can try to keep a perspective on it is to think about the difference of being liked versus respected. Because obviously we want every employee to really like us,
of course,
and to really respect us. And in fairness, if neither of those or either of those isn't in place, then they're probably not the right employee. But it's the importance of respect versus like, because respect means that somebody is not going to take liberties. It means that you are in a position to give them feedback when you need to, and it means that you can challenge them if they're not performing or if there are things that are not right. Whereas if you are softly, lovely, because you really want someone to like you, then you'll end up in that really difficult position where your relationship has become more personal than business, and you have to try and change the direction of it, which is much harder than building the right relationship to start with. So that's generally the way I would say approach it, is think right from the outset. Even basic things like making sure that people have got targets and that they have regular appraisals and one-to-ones and things like that. Even with one employee, they should still be getting regular feedback and having appraisals and have some clear targets. But just bear in mind that whole differential between it's more important to be respected than it is to be liked.
That's a really good point, because we all want to be liked.
Absolutely,
you want them to want to come and work with you and enjoy it and love it and stay.
Yes.
But if they don't respect you, they probably won't.
And it's easy to think that if they like me, they will stay.
Yeah.
But actually, they're much more likely to stay if they seriously respect you.
Yeah.
And maybe they don't 100% like you, but they'll 95% like you. But if they 100% respect you, then they'll appreciate you and they're more likely to stay.
And they're only probably going to 95% like you, because the rest of the time is you're addressing things with them that you should address, like lateness or missing targets or whatever that is. And one thing we've learned through working with you is that just because confronting a problem can feel very negative, very daunting. Having to have that conversation with someone that you've got a relationship with and say, listen, you keep being late, stop it. But instead of, you don't have to be like, right, you've been late, stop it, you can't be late. You don't have to go in and be direct. And I think if you depending on your personality is how you should come across, how you should deal with things. So kindness and positivity and respect, always lead with that. So I really know, like, one thing I picked up was just, I've noticed that.
Yes.
what is there a reason? What's the reason? Instead of going, you're late, don't be late. It's like, I've noticed that you've been late for a few days in a row. What's the reason? Is everything okay? Because then you're starting it with kindness. They might be like, oh, I'm having a really rough time at home. And you can talk about it. Or they might say, I know, I'm really sorry. But it's a good starting point to open the conversation. It doesn't have to be this massive, awful, negative conversation that you will then avoid.
Yeah, absolutely true. And I think another thing with that is making sure that if there is feedback around that needs to be given, it's giving it quickly.
Yeah, which is really the hard thing.
Very much so. But it's very easy to, somebody's 5 minutes late. It's not a big deal, is it? Oh, they've been 5 minutes late again this week. Oh, that's a bit annoying. And then it happens for the third week and you're starting to get really perturbed, shall we say, by it. And by the time it's the fourth or fifth week, you're really pissed off. But actually, you haven't said anything the other week, so now you almost feel like you've lost the ground to say something because you've tolerated it. And I'm not suggesting that you're micromanaging to the extent that at the first point that someone's 5 minutes late, you're on their back, because we've gone too far there. But if you're seeing something a couple of times, and if you start that conversation with kindness, then you can have that conversation quite early and it doesn't become an issue. Whereas what a lot of people do is they hide from the feedback because they want to be liked. So they hide from that feedback and they want to be lovely. We want this to be a nice place to work, and everyone's an adult. So we just want everyone to be an adult and to be responsible. And I don't want to have to give this feedback, but sometimes you don't have that choice. And, that's where stepping into that leadership role is making sure that any kind of steps around poor performance just get dealt with really quickly, and then they just don't turn into an issue, or they turn into a proper issue and there's a parting of ways.
Yeah, and that's just if it's just you and one employee, you might think, oh, it doesn't matter, but think of your future team, your future business. You're setting up how things will be dealt with. You're setting what's it called in the legal world? I can't remember, but where the word escapes me. But you're setting like that base level of expectation for that person, and then anyone who comes in, that is the way that it's done.
These are our company standards,
and it's that's your initial process, and you're protecting the rest of your team from future poor attitude.
And you see, there's the beauty that you just said. That's your process.
Yeah.
And again, you see, you can turn everything into a process.
Everything can be a process,
And you could literally have a process like that. If we've got a problem with lateness, our process is the second time we see that, we'll have a really quiet word. The third time we see that, we might have to have a sterner word. And you take that emotion out again, and it's just a process.
Yeah. And then it's fair and consistent for all. So I wanted to just touch on something we have talked about. So we've talked about going networking and working with people like yourselves to ease the burden of leadership, because it can feel really lonely at times. But is there anything else that you would add to make I say burden, it feels like that's a negative word, isn't it? I suppose the weight and the responsibility of leadership. Is there anything else that you would suggest to make it feel a little less so?
I think for me, the key thing is making sure that you build a really positive team around you. And as you say, networking, I think, can be one way to really do that. I mean, I actually host 2 different networking groups because I love networking. I mean, it's the main way I grow my business, but I just get so much other value from it as well. So I think using things like networking to build that sort of team around you. And it's also making sure that you're working with great suppliers who are supportive. So I know your accountant is a really big support to you, and she's somebody that you really trust and that you can go to with those financial questions. So it's thinking about all the different areas of your business, and do you really trust, do you really like all the suppliers that you work with, because all of them become your support team.
So important.
And fleshing out your kind of business buddies. If there's people that you meet down the road, I don't just mean down the road Tesco, but you know what I mean, down the business road, that you click with, then actually make an effort to keep in touch with those people, because if you just find a kindred spirit out there, occasional conversation actually can be really kind of reinforcing or just really, really helpful. I think one of the key things I would say is just don't keep things in your head. Because I often talk about the power of just talking about things, and some days I'll speak to a client and they'll they'll sort of talk at me for about 20 minutes, and maybe halfway through I might pick on something and say, just tell me a bit more about that bit.
Like a business therapist.
Kind of. And they'll talk for 20 minutes or something like that, and at the end of that 20 minutes they'll go, so that's my problem, this is why it's an issue, here's the solution, that's what I'm going to do about it. Paula, you've been amazing, and I've done barely anything. But when you've got things in your head, there is no logical order to them whatsoever, and they generally go a million miles an hour. And I often talk about it, they're like fireworks. You know, you've just got these million things going on about, I've got to deal with this, I must do that, I've got to have that conversation, I've got to challenge that person on this, or I've got to sort out that marketing, we've got to think about the new hire, and a million things, and they're just literally popping like fireworks. Whereas actually, the action of talking it through with somebody forces you to turn those thoughts into some kind of logical order.
Yeah.
You have to slow them down to be able to get them out of your mouth. And so often hearing them back is remarkable, that you get clarity from just hearing it back. So I'm a massive believer in talking, and I would say talk to your business buddies, your suppliers, get yourself a business coach or somebody like that. Obviously, I think they're the best thing since sliced bread.
Yeah, and I agree. Like sometimes I won't have anything specific to talk to you about versus others when you come for our meetings. But just asking me a question and letting me chat, and I'm like, oh, now I'm saying that out loud, and like you say, it does reorganise you. Or you'll say something, I'm like, oh, I've got an idea.
Yeah.
Let's do this. Or actually, that makes, and it's just like, it's the old adage: is it a problem shared is a problem halved? And it genuinely is, and it doesn't have to just be problems, just thoughts helps. Yes, I really like that.
Because sometimes as well, if it's whether you spot it yourself or somebody else spots it, as you start to talk things through to the listener, there's a theme, and you haven't spotted that theme yourself. But when somebody hears it back, they go, hang on a minute, I think what you're telling me here by accident is this. And then when you get that feedback back, it's like, oh my God, I just hadn't realised that. Yeah. And it'll be a sort of linchpin that actually helps you then to reorganise your thoughts or find that solution that you're looking for. So
amazing.
Talking is definitely powerful. And I think it's really key as a leader, because you're doing that bit of sharing the right messages with the team, holding back the messages that you don't think need to be shared with the whole team, but they still need to be offloaded or talked through with somebody else ideally.
Yeah, 100% agree with that. So I think we are coming. Well, I'm coming to the end of my questions, but I have one more question, and then we've got fresh or stale. Ooh. So, if you could instantly master a new skill, what would it be?
Do you know, it's funny because at the networking meeting this morning, they asked us a question about if you could swap businesses with somebody else for a day, what would you do? And I found that quite tricky. If I could learn one skill, I'd probably say something musical, strangely enough, because I'm not an artsy, crafty, creative. I'm very sort of left-brained. So yeah, probably go, I don't know, play the piano. Maybe I play the drums in a rock band. Who knows?
Yeah, please do that. That would be amazing. Yeah, do you know what? I think mine would be, like, I'd love to speak, like, I can speak Spanish a bit. So it's not a new skill, but I suppose any language, just be able to instantly learn a language. But then just before you said musical, it came into my head to be able to sing. Oh. Like, well, I mean, I can sing, obviously.
I can do that quite badly on a karaoke.
Yeah, I can sing, but quite badly. But to sing well would be good. So we're both coming in I think we're both left brain people. Yeah. So I think, to learn something right brain and creative would be pretty cool instantly as well. Like, so fresh or stale is the game that we play at the end of the podcast. So I'm going to say 5 words or phrases, and you have to tell me if you think it's fresh or stale, and maybe a short explanation why.
I'll do my best.
Okay, so gardening.
Oh, fresh. Now that I'm in my 50s, I really like flowers though. They're so kind of positive and colourful and nice. And I've got my office looks out onto the garden, and I think when I'm sort of, if I haven't got great energy or if I needed a bit of creativity, I just kind of find myself looking outside, and somehow it sort of reboosts the energy a little bit.
Do you know what? I know what you mean though. So we've recently revamped our garden because we refurbed inside first, and I just feel so much more happy when I stand at the window and look outside, especially now we've got these new plants that flower in the yellow and pink, and I love it. I feel
like there's something with me, I think, about nature connected to opportunity, because nature just flourishes. Yeah. And I think there's something about that to me always is something quite positive.
Oh, I love that. Okay, so swift topic change. AI generated content.
If you're doing a straight copy and paste, that is stale as it comes. Using AI to just help you to trigger ideas, to start off your ideas, or you can use AI for brainstorming. It's amazing for that. I think AI has a lot to offer, but please God, do not just get it to create your content and paste that straight in, because
You can tell.
but you can tell, but also the way to build your business is to let people see who you are and connect with you, and they can't see that if it's AI.
No, totally agree. But yeah, ChatGPT is my best friend.
ChatGPT last week enabled me to get back into a Bitcoin account I've not had access to for 3 years. Thank you, Chatster. There you go.
Oh my goodness. Go on, ChatGPT. Okay, next one. LinkedIn newsletters.
Fresh.
I really need to
And
do this.
so not enough people are doing them. Massive opportunity there.
I get Rachel onto it. Hustle culture.
Oh, so stale. So stale. 24/7. Work, 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 work. That's not why we started the business, is it? Holidays. That's the culture.
Holidays. Yeah, holiday culture.
Yeah.
Right, we're going to start a new phrase. And lastly, air fryers.
Oh, fresh. Love an air fryer.
I don't know what I did without my air fryer.
I have no idea what we did without an air fryer. We have one at home and one at the caravan.
We take ours camping with us. And I found a new use for it after the Freshies last week. We have pizza and fries as the food. So I didn't eat all my pizza because I was busy dancing. And I took half of it home, and then I put it in the air fryer. It was like a brand new pizza.
Air fryers, I feel like I'm giving too much away now, but air fryers are awesome for last night's takeaway.
Oh,
Seriously,
yeah.
they're
So good.
amazing.
Right? Well, I can't believe how fast it's gone. Thoroughly enjoyed it.
I had a feeling we wouldn't have a problem getting the conversation
we could talk
flowing.
the whole rest of the day, couldn't we? But thank you so much.
You are most welcome. Thank you very much for the
joining
invite.
me.
I have loved it.
Yeah. And if you want to contact us at Fresh Perspective, you can find us on all social media, particularly LinkedIn. Laura Leyland, Paula Cohen. Cohen is Cohen, and her business is Taylory. If you wanted to reach out to Paula, our website is www.f-for-perspective-resourcing.co.uk. You can find us on TikTok and YouTube, as well as LinkedIn, Facebook, and Instagram.
Awesome.
Can't get away from us. If you've liked this podcast, please listen to the others. Tell someone about it. Leave us a review and subscribe. And we will see you or hear you next time.
Yay.
Bye.
Bye.